All right, so here's lesson 10 in our Earth and Climate unit. Here we're going to be focusing on the effects of climate change. This is an important lesson for you guys to pay attention to because there will be an exam question asking you guys to describe some of the effects of climate change and give me a little bit of detail on them. So you'll see what I mean when we get into our slides here. And when you check out your notes, you'll see a header, and that's kind of like the effect of climate change. And then I want you to give me some details about what that means. So the first example is extreme weather. We've already seen the effects of this. Maybe not so much in the National Capital Region here in Ottawa, but as Al Gore was talking about in An Inconvenient Truth, and like I've said before, I believe the intensity and the frequency of these extreme weather instances is increasing. Things such as forest fires, droughts, floods, and storms are all increasing. This can lead to an economic loss, right? If you think about Katrina and the crazy amount of damage that was done to people's homes and businesses, that's got to come out of somebody's pocket, right? And if families have to fork over money to repair their homes, that's money that they can't spend on other goods or services that may go towards helping the economy. Also, of course, increased weather, or kind of funny weather patterns, hurricanes, floods can always lead to deaths due to natural disasters, particularly in developing countries, third world countries, where their infrastructure is not set up to withstand these weather events, particularly if they are weather events that are relatively rare. If you look at Ottawa, for example, our buildings and our homes are not built to withstand earthquakes because they just don't happen here. And there's no reason for us to invest that kind of money into natural events that aren't a threat to us, right? We don't get earthquakes, don't get very many hurricanes, which is different from places like Western United States where earthquakes are common, or some parts near the Gulf of Mexico where intense storms are common. If you take a look at third world countries, they simply don't invest in this type of infrastructure, and so if and when they get these extreme weather events, they are typically unprepared for them. Water, we've spoken about water a little bit already. Fresh water is impacted. If you remember from An Inconvenient Truth, a big freshwater source is due to glaciers, and if those are impacted, then of course our freshwater quantity, i.e. the amount of fresh water, as well as the quality, the safetiness of the fresh water, if it's drinkable or not, that is also impacted. When we talk about water, we also talk about droughts and floods. I've said this before, but the droughts in California are a very big deal. There are some floods in other parts of the planet. Precipitation patterns, increased rain or snow, and things such as glaciers melting or lakes and rivers drying up. We've seen a bunch of pictures in class as part of An Inconvenient Truth that shows you lakes and rivers that are either no longer there anymore or on their way to disappearing. We talked a little bit about forests in the last lesson. Forest fires, droughts, and high temperatures. We've spoken about how that, as well as insects, can affect forests, which should ideally function as carbon sinks. But if climate change continues on its pattern, that affects the forest, and then we kind of have this positive feedback loop where the worse the climate is, the worse the forest gets. And the worse the forest gets, the worse the climate is. Ecosystems is an interesting one because it's not something that we typically think about a lot, because an ecosystem is just such a massive idea that it's hard to think about it, right? But an interesting point is that migration patterns can change, and some species may face extinction due to global climate change. If you look at the picture on the left of your screen, that's the kind of the way that the ecosystems in Canada are set up. Ecosystems might not be necessarily the best word, but we can look at the tundra up north, which is unsurprising, the boreal forests, kind of in the greenbelt area, and temperate grasslands. These all they've been like this for a very long time, and the species and animals that have been there for a long time, and they are dependent on the plants, and the plants are dependent on the animals. If CO2 patterns continue the way they are, and if they double, if the atmospheric carbon dioxide doubles, which is projected to be around the year 2060, knowing our luck, it'll be sooner than that, you can see how all of these areas have shifted northward because it's getting warmer up north. And the boreal forests, for example, can start to move up north because they want that warmer climate. But warmer is relative, of course. The temperate forests that are typically isolated to southern Ontario and Quebec, some of the maritime provinces, you can see how they will spread out because of the way the temperatures are going to be shifting. So it's very important for us to kind of keep that in mind, because we will start to see a day where species that we are not used to start to invade your region. A global meltdown in terms of ice, of course, is what we're talking about. We've spoken about this to great lengths already. The permafrost in the Arctic is melting. It'll cause the ground to shift. It'll cause damage to buildings that are there. And as this ice melts, there's a positive feedback loop relating to more greenhouse gas emissions. We've already spoken about ice sheets melting and sea ice melting, and how that may have an effect on the wildlife. Our health is obviously very important. Tropical diseases such as West Nile, which are typically not found in Canada, have moved into Canada. Things such as air pollution. If you take a look in China, when the summer games were held there, the Olympic Games, they had to have a rolling shutdown of the factories so that the air was breathable, for lack of a better term. The people who live there are used to this air pollution, but it was the foreigners that were there, the athletes, the media, that they would have not been in a safe position given the quality of the air there. Also, with an increased heat, we get more heat-related deaths, heat strokes. And for anybody who has asthma, they know that exercising in the heat, running, is very, very difficult when it's too hot outside. Like I mentioned in our past video, we talked about the link between the environment and the economy. There are obvious economic risks. Our forest industry is a big industry in Canada, particularly out west. If our forests start to die out, or the wood is not healthy, or the wood is not usable, that's a big damage to our industry. Agricultural industry is another big one in Canada. We have lots of arable land, but if we have invasive species come in, or floods and droughts, that will pose a severe problem to our economy. We export a lot of these goods to other countries, and that's a way that Canada takes in some money. So again, you should know some of these, at least superficially, because you will be asked on your exam, just to give a couple examples of the effects of climate change on Canada, on the world. It's nice to focus on Canada if you can, and to elaborate a little bit on those. So that's it for this lesson. I believe we'll have one more, and then that'll be it for our climate unit.